And we are back. Welcome to my predictions for the UEFA Europa Conference League match day 2. It is time for the final European prediction video of the week. We have, of course, done 2 videos already over the last couple of days. If you want to see my predictions for today's Champions League matches, you can check that out with the video at the top of your screen right now. And right below it, you will see my predictions for today's and tomorrow's Europa League matches as well. And of course, don't forget to make sure that you are subscribed with notifications turned on so you don't miss out on my post-match reaction to tomorrow's game between Fenerbahce and Manchester United. And more importantly, so you don't miss out on my predictions for the next round of Premier League matches, which we'll be doing at this time on Friday morning. But as we say, we are here today not to talk about any of those matches. We are here to talk about the Conference League, or as I'm starting to call it, the Cypriots Conference League, because I think nearly half the matches we'll talk about today will be talking about a Cyprus club at least once, either talking about them in the match or about them being in a previous match. But let's skip ahead to the next screen where you'll see in match day 1, we were only able to get 9 out of 18 correct results. So not the best performance on match day 1, and also no correct scores. The only competition we're covering on this channel so far where I've not got one correct score spot on. But it is what it is. Don't forget, of course, to drop a like on this video if you do enjoy all of my prediction series. And without any further ado, let's get straight into it because we've got all 18 matches to cover today. One match taking place on Thursday afternoon, then 10 matches taking place mid-evening, and then 7 matches taking place at the end of the night. So a lot of games to get through. We'll start off with the earliest of all kickoffs, which is quite an important one because the first of the matches today sees bottom club Reykjavik Vikings taking on top club Celta Brugge of Belgium. So massive game already, the top side against the bottom side. What's interesting going into this is despite the fact that Vikings lost their opening game 4-0 at home, they have gone into won their last 2 games domestically, whereas Brugge have actually gone top of the league by winning 6-2 on match day 1, but then haven't won a single game since then, and haven't even scored since match day 1, which is just a bit of a bizarre one to take into consideration. That said, though, the fact that it is the Icelandic side that are bottom and it is the Belgian side that are top, considering the competition that they beat and lost to respectively on match day 1, would suggest that realistically there is still only going to be one winner in tomorrow's game, and that is going to be Brugge. So I am going to go for a 4-1 victory. I'm backing the Reykjavik Vikings to get themselves a goal, but realistically, it's not going to be enough to see them get a result here. Even, like I say, in the games that they have won in the last couple of weeks, they've also conceded 5 goals across those 2 games. So defensively, they're all over the place. I expect a win for the Belgian side. The first of the 7:45 kickoffs sees Apoel Nicosia taking on what I'm calling BBL Bora Borajanga. I cannot say them properly. The Bosnian side. Now, in match day 1, both of these sides had 1-1 draws. Apoel drew 1-1 away to Shamrock Rovers, whereas BBL drew at home to Panathinaikos. What is interesting, though, again, if we look at the actual domestic form, the Bosnian side have won all 3 of their matches since match day 1. Meanwhile, Apoel lost their opening game after it, but then won 5-0 at the weekend. In terms of injuries and suspensions, there are no serious concerns for either of these sides going into this game. So my expectation is going to be for the Cypriot side to take the victory here. I'm not going to go crazy with it, though. I'm only going to go for a 2-1 victory. The Bosnians proved themselves capable with getting that draw against Panathinaikos in match day 1, and they're definitely capable of producing a result here. I just think with the Cyprus side now back at home, I would expect Apoel to just about get the result. On to the next one, and it is Druga again, I cannot say them properly, taking on Victoria of Portugal. Now, Drugan were able to get the 2-2 draw away with Austrian League leaders, or Austrian champions, LASK, in match day 1, whereas for Victoria, it was a 3-1 win over NK Celja. I can't say that one properly either. However, the one in that 3-1 was a 92nd minute consolation. So you would expect Victoria to be going into this one the slightly stronger of the sides. For Jurgen, it was defeat for them at the weekend, whereas for Victoria, it was 4 games unbeaten in a row for them. Drottningen also have a lot of players potentially injured for this one. They've had a fair few coming back. Whenever I check the match reports for these matches, it always sort of says when these players could be coming back. And I think they had 9 players potentially injured for this one, but it said that all 9 players could still be available for this one, which is a little bit of a bizarre one. And the interesting thing about this, with them being at home, is that in the calendar year of 2024, Drottningen have only actually lost 3 matches at home all year long. So watch this space. They're a very strong side when it comes to home performances. I'm going for a 1-1 draw, but on paper, I think Victoria would have to be considered the favourites for this. But we'll see. They're not having the best of seasons in Portugal so far. I'm going for a 1-1 draw. That then brings us back to Belgium, because it is time for Ghent, and they are taking on Molde. Ghent were able to get a 4-2 defeat to Chelsea, which I think, to be fair, considering how strong Chelsea are in comparison to everyone else in this entire competition, I think a 4-2 defeat at Stamford Bridge isn't that bad. Meanwhile, Molde were getting a 3-0 victory over Northern Irish side Larne. They were both in the Conference League together in 2022, and on those occasions, it was a 4-0 victory in Belgium. It was a 0-0 draw in at Molde. So you would say Genk certainly have the advantage here. Genk were also able to get a draw against Union Saint-Gilloise at the weekend. Obviously, they are in a higher competition in Europe this season. Again, no real injury or suspension concerns coming into this for either side. So for me, this is your bog standard. Give it 2-1 to the home team. So I'm giving it 2-1 to the home team. Next up, it is Hearts taking on another one of the Nicosias. This time it is Ammonia Nicosia. An interesting one here once again. Both of these sides were able to get victories on match day 1. For Hearts, it was victory in Azerbaijan over Dinamo Minsk of Belarus. Meanwhile, Ammonia Nicosia were the side to beat the Reykjavik Vikings 4-0 on match day 1. Going into this, when you look at the bookmakers, they have Ammonia as the favourites for this one. However, they've not been playing great in Cyprus over the last few weeks. And in fact, since match day 1, Ammonia Nicosia have lost all of their matches. Meanwhile, Hearts have started to get their Scottish League campaign back together and were able to get a 4-0 victory at the weekend over, I think it was Kilmarnock. I've not got it down in my notes who it was, but I think it was a 4-0 victory for them. So even though everyone else thinks Ammonia Nicosia are going to be the favourites for this one, I am actually not going for that. I'm going for a 2-2 draw, and it honestly wouldn't surprise me to see Hearts get the win here. But a narrow one to call. I'm backing the draw here. Next up, it is the side that I will only refer to as JB. I will promise that before the end of match day 8, when we get round to the end of this Conference League, I will have learnt how to say the name of this team properly. But for now, it will remain JB. They are taking on Petrocub in tomorrow's match. They beat Copenhagen 2-1 away on match day 1, which I think is a real good result. Albeit, it was a 98th minute winner for JB, but to win away in Copenhagen is a fantastic result. Meanwhile, Petrocub were on the receiving end of a 4-1 home defeat to Paphos. Again, another side from Cyprus. Petrocub were able to get draws with league leaders Sheriff at the weekend. If you all remember Sheriff from their runs in the Champions League, matches with Real Madrid, etc. They were able to get the draw against them at the weekend. But let's be realistic. JB winning away to Copenhagen. Petrocub losing at home to Paphos. That should be enough indication alone as to where this one's going to go, let alone the rest of other forms or injuries and this, that and the other. JB should be taking this one comfortably. I am going for a 5-1 victory to the Polish side here. Next up is an absolutely massive one. It is Larne of Northern Ireland taking on Shamrock Rovers of the Republic of Ireland. Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland collide in the Europa Conference League tomorrow night. Both of these sides, I think, not doing their absolute best, certainly this season and certainly on match day 1. Larne beaten 3-0 by Molde. Shamrock getting the 1-1 draw at home to Applewell. What's again interesting is their actual form at the moment in their respective leagues. Larne have only drawn and lost their last 2 matches And both of those matches were at home in the Northern Irish League, whereas Shamrock Rovers have won both of their matches. They are also really hotting up in a title race at the moment in the Republic of Ireland, are Shamrock Rovers. I think there's 2 games left or 3 games left, and they are pushing to win the Irish League once again. So they're really at the back end of their season, where all of their players are coming into their best of forms, whereas Larne are slightly underperforming at the start of their season. In terms of injuries and suspensions, there is 1 suspension for Larne. McKendry got sent off in the 3-0 defeat to Mulder. But as far as I can see, there's nothing on any of the match reports to suggest he's actually been suspended. So I don't know if that got overturned. There is literally nothing to suggest that. But ultimately, when it comes to the form, when it comes to the sides on paper, for me, there's still only one winner. And that is a 3-1 victory to Shamrock Rovers. The Republic of Ireland side, on paper, like I say, should be much, much stronger than their Northern Irish counterparts. But this one could get a little bit tasty. So watch this space. Anything could happen when sides from those 2 countries collide. Next up, we are over to NK, and they are taking on Başak Şehir. Both of these sides actually lost on match day 1. NK lost to Victoria, as we have already mentioned, whereas Başak Şehir were beaten at home by Rapid Vienna of Austria. Also going into this game, Başak Şehir in the Turkish league themselves have only managed to pick up 1 win in their last 5 matches, and lost at the weekend to Trabzonspor, albeit through a 92nd minute winner or 92nd minute loser, depending on how you want to look at it. NK were on the winning side at the weekend. They won 4-3 in Slovenia at the weekend, so very contrasting in terms of the matchups there. A 1-0 defeat for Istanbul, a 4-3 victory for NK in Slovenia at the weekend. Again, I couldn't really find anything significant regarding injuries or suspensions for this one, so I have to look at it on face value. I have to look at the form of these 2 sides, which suggests that despite Istanbul, Başakşehir being the stronger side on paper, they really are off it at the moment. They're struggling to score goals. They're leaking goals in defence. Meanwhile, NK are scoring goals, but are leaking goals as well. So I've got to sort of place it somewhere in the middle, which is why I am going for a 1-1 draw in Slovenia tomorrow night. Then we come on to the only English club taking part, should I say, in the Conference League this year. It is Chelsea. They are travelling to Panathinaikos on match day 2. Panathinaikos, as we've already mentioned, drawing 1-1 with BBL of Bosnia on match day 1. Chelsea, as we've already mentioned, victorious 4-2 at Stamford Bridge over Ghent on match day 1. Panathinaikos followed up their draw with another draw against Olympiacos at a couple of weekends ago. Chelsea have actually not done great in the Premier League since their victory on match day 1, drawing against Nottingham Forest and then obviously losing to Liverpool at the weekend. The only problem for Panathinaikos coming into this is their star striker, I can't say his name properly, Ioannidis, the Greek international striker who everyone expected or wanted to see play against England before Pavlidis did the damage against England at Wembley instead. He is still struggling with injury. It's looking incredibly unlikely that he will be available for this one as things stand. Obviously, if that changes in the next 24 hours, that may affect how this game goes. But without him, I don't really see them causing Chelsea too many problems. This might be a little bit unfair on Panathinaikos, but I am going for a 3-0 victory to Chelsea. I think even if they change their entire starting 11, the strength of that Chelsea side is just going to be too strong. So I think 3-0 is just about fair. I could potentially see Panathinaikos grabbing themselves a goal, but like I say, without Ioannidis up front, I just don't think it's realistic. And then the final game on this page, but the penultimate game in terms of the 5:45 kickoffs, it is Rapid Vienna of Austria taking on FC Noah of, I think it was Armenia. I don't want to get that wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's of Armenia. Rapid Vienna taking on Armenian side FC Noah. And both of these sides with really impressive results, it has to be said, on match day 1. As we've already mentioned, Rapid went and won in Istanbul against Başak Şehir. Meanwhile, Noah were beating Mlada Borislav 2-0. A clean sheet for them on match day 1. A really impressive result for them. What is also interesting is this is a game where there are a lot of injuries going into it. Rapid have no less than 10 potential injuries going into this game. Again, a few of them could be available for this one, but they might rotate players around anyway as they try and bring people back up to full fitness, which could affect how they approach this match. However, even with all their injury problems, domestically in Austria, they have been absolutely flying at the moment. They have been winning like crazy. They've got themselves up to second in the Austrian table, just 1 point behind Sturm Graz, who of course are playing Champions League football this year, on the receiving end of that 2-0 defeat to Sporting Lisbon last night. As for Noah, they have continued their dominance over the Armenian League, and they've won 5-0 and 6-0 in their 2 matches in Armenia since match day 1. So 11 goals scored, none conceded. They've not conceded in any of their last 3 matches going into this game against Rapid Vienna. They're clearly a side that is very tough to break down. So we'll see how this one goes. The expectation would obviously be for the Austrian side, especially at home, to come out on top, especially given how well they've been playing recently as well. But I'm only going to go for 2-1, purely as a precaution, just because of how well Noah played on match day 1 and how dominant and how damaging they've been to the other sides in Armenia since. But like I say, realistically, this should still be a victory to the Austrian side. That will conclude the first page, so have a long last look at it before I turn it over in 3, 2, and 1, because we still have one last game to cover in the earlier kickoffs on match day 2. That is the game between St. Gallen of Switzerland and Fiorentina of Italy. St. Gallen were on the receiving end of that 6-2 defeat to Selke on match day 1, which sees them 35th, because obviously, like we said, they scored 2 goals. Even though they conceded 6, it gives them the goals scored bonus to put them above the side of the Vikings, who are bottom of the table. Meanwhile, Fiorentina were absolutely comfortable. They won 2-0 over the New Saints of Wales. And in that game, they had 80% possession and 3.5 XG. And were still only able to come away with a 2-0 victory. So it's just a case of, were they able to score goals? For St. Gallen in the Swiss League, they have come away with 2 bad results, arguably, since. They drew and then they lost 2-1 to Basel at the weekend. Meanwhile, Fiorentina have come away with 2 wins out of 2, winning 1-0 over AC Milan before the international break, and then coming back from the international break, going to Lecce at the weekend and winning 6-0. So they're starting to turn those dominant 80% possession performances into heavy goal-scoring victories. And let's not forget that St. Gallen conceded 6 on match day 1. Put those 2 things together, it's not looking very good for St. Gallen. I am going for a 5-0 victory to the Italian side here. I think it would be the biggest shock of the night if St. Gallen were able to get anything out of the Italian side on that one. That then rounds off all of the earlier kickoffs on Thursday for the Conference League. We then have 7 games taking place at 8 o'clock. And the first of those matches is between HJK and Dynamo Minsk. HJK, incredibly, have lost all of their last 4 matches without scoring a single goal. And that includes a 3-0 defeat to Lugano on match day 1. You could almost say they're finished. You get it? Meanwhile, the Belarusians lost 2-1 to Heart on match day 1, but have won all 3 of their domestic games since and are well clear at the top of the Belarusian league right now, with games in hand as well. For me, this is not going to be a very entertaining game. This is going to be a 0-0 or a 1-0 either way, in my opinion. Given the fact that HJK haven't scored a single goal in their last 4, I'm not going to give one to them, and I'm going to go for a 1-0 win to Dynamo Minsk. I just hate going for 0-0 draws, but inevitably with this competition that happened so many times last season, when I say it could be 0-0 and I go for 1-0, it inevitably ends up being 0-0. Next up, it is Mlada Boleslav taking on Lugano, 2 sides that we have mentioned very, very recently. Mlada were on the receiving end of that 2-0 defeat to Noah. Meanwhile, as we've literally just mentioned, it was Lugano who came out on top in match day 1. But realistically, not doing particularly great in their respective leagues. Mlada certainly not on the same level as the 2 Prague sides from the Czech Republic, and even Victoria Pilsen, who are doing okay in the Europa League. They're currently 10th and have no wins in their last 6. Meanwhile, Lugano haven't won either game since match day 1, where they got that victory over HJK. So It's not looking great for either of these sides domestically at the moment, but at least Lugano come into this off the back of a victory on match day 1. The expectation for me is that Lugano do end up getting the victory again here. I'm going to go for 2-1. I still think Borislav could potentially nick themselves a goal because Lugano's defensive record hasn't been great over the last few weeks. But I would still expect them to come out on top. That then takes us to Olympia taking on Lask, and this is another really, really tough one to call. Olympia lost 2-1 away to Heidenheim, which, again, in my opinion, is a pretty damn good result. Heidenheim doing very, very well in the Bundesliga last season to even qualify for this competition from the Bundesliga is an achievement even of itself. They're still doing okay in the Bundesliga, obviously more of them in the next game. So for Olympia to go there and get a 2-1 defeat isn't too bad. Whereas I think last drawing at home to Drottningen, I think is not a very good result. They were able to bounce back in their respective Austrian league by getting 2 wins out of 2, but only have a 0 goal difference in the Austrian league so far this season. So they are shipping as many goals as they are scoring. Olympia remain top of the Slovenian league right now with wins in their most recent matches. So with Olympia being at home, I think even though a lot of people are going to say Lask should be considered the favourites for this, and even I will sit here and say that Lask should be considered the favourites for this, I am going for a 1-1 draw. And to be honest, if I had to pick a winner, I would be leaning towards the Slovenian side right now and saying that Olympia should be the side that wins if there is going to be a winner. Next up, we are back to Cyprus because it is Paphos taking on Heidenheim. Paphos 4-1 victors over Petra Club on match day 1. Heidenheim, as we just said, 2-1 victors over Olympia on match day 1. Heidenheim have also won... No, apologies. Since then, Heidenheim have lost both of their matches in the Bundesliga. They lost to Mönchengladbach and then RB Leipzig, which leaves them 9th in the Bundesliga this season. So they're not doing as well this season as they got on last season. Paphos have continued their run of dominance in the Cypriot League since match day 1. However, what we can say is a 4-1 victory over Petra Club isn't much of an indicator of how they're going to do against a side like Heidenheim. What you can look at instead is how they got on in Europa League qualifying rather than Europa Conference, where they come up against Elfsborg, who obviously we spoke about a lot yesterday in the Europa League video. And over the 2 legs, Paphos lost 8-2 to Elfsborg. So against what you would consider stronger opposition, they are tending to fold. They are the home side here, so you never know. But given that they were beaten that heavily by Elfsborg, and given the fact that Heidenheim are only losing narrowly to the likes of Gladbach and Leipzig in the Bundesliga, it should still be very strongly considered that the German side come out on top here. I'm going to go for 3-1. We'll see. I think Paphos are definitely capable in this one, but I still think it would be a bit of a shock if it is anything other than a win for Heidenheim. Next up, 2 sides that really disappointed on match day 1. Real Betis of Spain and FC Copenhagen, the Danish champions. Now, both of them were on the receiving end of defeats, arguably shock defeats. Betis lost to Legia Warsaw. Copenhagen lost to JB with that 98th minute losing goal. Both teams are also arguably missing their most important creative players. Real Betis are without Isco and are now also without Giovanni Lo Celso, whereas Copenhagen are missing Falk. Both of them got wins at the weekend, so they've had a little bit of a momentum builder going into this one. But I don't know. It's just another classic case of you've got 2 sides that are on very mixed form, very bad in terms of important injuries. So when all things are considered, when it's in like that, all you can say is go, it's the classic 2-1 home win. And I wish I could give you more intel than that, but it's just so tough to call this one. This is one of the toughest ones of the week. And I just think 2-1 to Betis is the safe option. So that is what I'm going for. Next up, in the penultimate game, it is the New Saints of Wales taking on Astana of Kazakhstan. New Saints were absolutely dominated and battered by Fiorentina, as we already mentioned. 80% possession for Fiorentina in that one, and it really should have been more than the 2-0 that it was. Astana, on the other hand, were victorious over Baka Topola and have no injuries going into this game. So all I can really say about this is the new Saints didn't look great. They've not particularly played great in Wales since their last match. Astana have continued to play well domestically, but they're not scoring many goals. So neither side are scoring goals. Astana simply aren't conceding at all. So I think the safest option here is to just have a complete repeat of Astana's Matchday 1 result, which is a 1-0 victory to Astana. Again, could be a tight one, but I would expect Astana to come out on top, which leaves one last game to go for the week. It is the Serbian side, back at Opola, taking on the Polish side, Legia Warsaw. As we've literally just said, Baka were on the receiving end of a 1-0 defeat to Astana on Matchday 1, whereas Legia Warsaw were 1-0 victors over Real Betis. Legia have not been having the best of seasons domestically, it has to be said. They are 9 points off the pace in the Polish league, and they drew with JB a couple of weeks ago, which I think they would have expected to get a better result. I think they were at home in that one and were only able to get a draw against JB, who are top of the Polish league at the moment. Meanwhile, Topola sit a full 15 points off the top in the Serbian league. They are not playing very well at the moment. They also lost on Matchday 1. Legia won on Matchday 1. So all things considered, the only real result I can go for is a win for Legia Warsaw. I'm going for 2-1. I do think, once again, there are a lot of dodgy fixtures going into these Europa Conference League matches, but I'm just getting up to speed on these teams. That's the joy of this competition. We have 8 match days to sort of get to know these teams properly. I'm sure by match days 5 and 6, we might be able to pick some results a little bit better. But for now, I think it's going to be another really tough night to call. I've gone for something like 5 or 6 draws in there and a lot of 1-goal winning margins. But as always, if you've got even more information than me, let me know down in the comment section below and let me know all of your thoughts about these 18 matches. Thank you very much for all of the support you've given this channel, as always, over these last 3 days. Massive views, massive comments down in the comment section. So thank you very much for all of the support. I will be back tomorrow night for my post-match reaction to Fenerbahce versus Manchester United. And then we do it all over again on Friday morning for the next round of Premier League fixtures. So I'll say a final thank you very much for watching once again. I'll see you very soon.